Stress. Guess what? You're experiencing it, I'm experiencing it. Just today I heard that maybe this COVID-19 thing can pass from people to animals back to people. Now that's another thing to worry about. How many things can we worry about without losing our minds? Today we're going to check out how can we get through anxious times? How can we battle anxiety and remain calm? Stay tuned. If you're like me, you've noticed that our world is very anxious, right? People are really worried. They're wearing gloves, they're putting on masks, they're trying not to touch things. There's a shortage of Lysol and cleaning supplies. I mean, people are nervous, right? And in a normal world, right, where things aren't going chaotic, we sort of wake up each day and we're, fairly calm as long as you've slept well. Matter of fact, if we were going to rate it from 0 to 10, 10 being the worst stress that a person could handle, most people wake up with a 0 or 1, right? And they kind of get up, have their coffee, go out, face the day. Well, since this pandemic has spread, at least in North America, right, there is this permeating stress that's in everybody, even people who are handling it well. So if you would have started out a normal day at a 0 or a 1, now you're starting out at like a 1, 2, or 3. You're already edgy because the times call for this sort of edginess. The amygdala in our brain is registering that life is kind of a threat. And so we have to be careful. And so it puts us in a hypervigilant state. And because it puts us in a hypervigilant state, we're kind of wary. Well, that wariness is a form of chronic stress. Chronic stress is stress that starts and doesn't really end. Acute stress is stress that happens in that moment, you deal with it, and then it goes away and we recover. Chronic stress is much more difficult to deal with because it's an ongoing stressor, and our amygdala is registering the ongoing stress as a concern, as a threat. So it's pumping adrenaline and stress hormones and cortisol, those type of things in our brain all the time to give us the energy and the reserves of energy to get through it. But the problem is too much of that, too many stress hormones in our body is destructive, especially if they stay in there for a long period of time. So the longer this anxiety goes, the longer we live in the stress of these times, right, the more it starts to wear on us. And so we have to be careful that we don't become these anxious, really stressed out people. So today we're going to talk about what we can do to keep ourselves calm and to navigate through these stressful waters. The first thing you have to do, right, is you have to be aware of your emotional state. All of us have an emotional state, even those of us who think we're not really emotional. We have an emotional state. We just may not let people know what we're feeling or what we're thinking. But we're still feeling it, we're still experiencing it. So it's really important that we don't just neglect it or internalize it or just like suck it up because people can't know. Nor do we want to just express it inappropriately and yell and scream and get mad at people. We want to process it. So the emotions within us, right, the easiest way to process is by using some type of artistic release like writing or painting, some way to express the emotion that you feel. My favorite way is writing in a journal, but in the form of a letter. You start out by saying, "Dear Granny, last night was pretty good. I slept okay. This morning I got up, turned on the news, heard about the CDC, and now I'm worried about my pets and everything else, and what am I going to do about it?" And so then I write and I process. And then towards the end of the letter, I say, "All right, Granny, I love you. I'll talk to you later, Doc." Now, I'm not mailing this letter. You could write it to God, you could write it to your granny, you could write it to someone that's important to you, or you could just make somebody up. But the important part is I'm expressing my emotion and my thoughts about things. I'm getting them out. When you're in the midst of stress and anxious times, you have to get it out. And that's one of the healthiest ways to do it, right? So be aware of that emotional state. The second thing you have to be aware of is the physical state. A lot of us will start getting physical problems. We'll have neck pain, back pain, stress. We won't sleep good. The physical toll of being under chronic stress wears on us. So be very aware of your sleep patterns. Be very aware of what you're eating. During this time, really try to eat better, right? And be active. If you can exercise, it's great, especially if you're exercising 4 or 5 times a week, but at least be active. Don't just get locked in watching Netflix or something else all day long, especially if it's in a dark space. Get out. Let the sunlight resonate off your eyes. Let it hit your skin. Get out and get a walk. Get the heart rate moving. The physical activity helps burn up negative stress and helps give us endorphins, which is like a positive form of energy. Very, very important, especially in stressful times. The third thing we need to be aware of is our spiritual state. Spirituality forms like a worldview and gives us like an anchor of stability. Even for those of us who say that we're not religious at all, right? We still have a worldview or some way we explain how life happens. Well, you have to really make sure that that's really clear and defined in you, and you have to hang on that, right? For me, I developed the spirituality part of me by meditating. Research tells us that if we can meditate and clear our mind, we have like a 65% boost of dopamine in our brain, and it gives us a sense of well-being. It's an amazing gift, meditation, right? So meditating, reading the Bible, or reading something relaxing and upbeat, praying, and if we're not really religious, going out into nature and kind of experiencing nature. It's almost like you have to pretend you're in Star Wars and you're a Jedi and you're feeling the Force, right? Enter into the water, enter into the nature, feel the air, feel the breeze, look at the leaves. Just try to relax and touch base with nature, right? It does this incredible grounding thing within us that makes us feel good, and it really helps stress get out of the way. So that's another important aspect of making sure we're doing the right things as we recover and navigate through these stressful waters. The fourth thing we have to be aware of is how active our mind is. A lot of times in stress, our brain starts speeding up. A lot of times that has to do with the amygdala registering that everything is a threat. So we have to convince our amygdala that it's not a threat. So we have to kind of promote calmness. So that's where you can laugh, right? If you watch something funny or tell yourself a funny joke, right? Laughter is really powerful. Music that relaxes you, movies that you can escape from but don't put a negative spin on life, those are good. You have to stop your negative thinking and worry. The minute you start to think it or worry about it, stop and say, look, I can't do that. What's the positive here? Try to turn the negative into positive. It's called cognitive reframing, right? Try not to focus on the negative of something, focus in on the positive of it. And if you can do that, right, you can help your mind let go of that negativity, which feeds stress. We have to be careful that during this time we don't self-medicate, because self-medicating is drinking alcohol and some other things, and they might give you a temporary band-aid, but they don't help. Some people will use aromatherapy. They'll light candles, right, and they'll let it kind of go into the air, and that scent relaxes them. One of our number one triggers that we have as people is our sense of smell. So aromatherapy is a great way to relax and to calm our mental activity. If we can calm the mental activity, right, we can relax. One of the reasons we keep having difficulty sleeping is if we're not processing stuff. When we go to sleep, if we hit REM sleep, our REM sleep mechanism, right, helps us put all the pieces of life together and tries to make sense of it. It stresses us out, and so a lot of times we'll wake up. So if we can process when we're awake, it makes sleep much better. So remember to be aware of your intellectual activity and how your brain is moving, especially if you're dealing with anxiety. And the last part is you have to be aware that there is a social part to people. We can't just alienate or isolate. We have to stay connected, whether it's with your faith, whether it's with your friends, whether it's with family. If you can actually have physical touch, you get released in your brain oxytocin, which really makes you feel better. That's a plus. But if you're not in a situation where you can get physical touch, then at least talk, chat, text, video chat, do something, but stay connected with people. Isolating loneliness does not help with stress. It only makes it worse. Look, we don't know what the upcoming days are going to be like. Obviously, our world is changing, and we have to learn better ways to be less anxious. The calmer we are, the more efficient we're going to be as a person, as people. So, here's my reminder to you. you can do it. You can navigate through these paths of anxiety, right? And you can bring calmness and control back. God bless. Doc out.